introduce the monks' music to more people and raise money for their new monastery in Nepal, Mickey Hart and members of the Grateful Dead organized an American tour for the Gyuto monks. Going on the road, performing in auditoriums like this one, might seem slightly sacrilegious. But according to the monks, once the music and the chanting begin, they could very well be in a monastery in Tibet or India. The sellout crowd is a mix of meditators, ethnic music fans, and deadheads, faithful to anything the Grateful Dead is involved with. What is your favorite group?
Group Grateful Dead.
Grateful Dead? To better appreciate this musical phenomenon, Mickey Hart teamed up with filmmaker George Lucas and his Star Wars technology. They wanted to capture all of the monks' acoustic brilliance in a state-of-the-art studio built for symphony orchestras. Most of the monks had heard of Star Wars, but had never seen it. Their stopover at George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch for the recording was yet another quantum leap for them in time and technology.
Oh, they love it. They love the PA now. They love the sound and the power, the sonic power and the capabilities of their chanting. They feel that their sound is really getting out there, individually and collectively.
The Dalai Lama, who heads the Tibetan monks in exile in India, has encouraged the Gyuto monks to take their music out of the monastery and on the road. Their growing popularity with foreigners is important to their plight as refugees and the survival of Tibetan Buddhism.
I came to meet Mickey because I was involved in inviting the Gyuto monks, which means the Upper Tantric College of Lhasa, who had reestablished themselves at that time in a town called Dalhousie, not far from Dharamsala. And I had been working with the abbot of that monastery, Tara Tulku, as a major teacher of mine. The Dalai Lama had assigned him to help me translate some very difficult books. And I received initiations from them, and I was very close. I was sort of honorary monk of that monastery, although I was no longer a monk at that point. I was a layman. And we helped bring them here. And then they had this multiphonic, what we call multiphonic chanting, where they have a very deep voice and they have these high overtones. And so we were helping it on a tour with them, and then the tour was only here in the East Coast. And somehow, I don't remember how I contacted Mickey, but I heard that he was really interested in the ethnographic sort of things and recording unusual things. And we appealed to him to organize a Western leg of the tour, California leg of the tour. And he did. He did a great concert for the monks, and he got to like them, and then he recorded them in fabulous studio in Berkeley. And he issued that early tape. So all around all of that and helping with the knowledge of it. Houston Smith was also somewhat involved. I think maybe Houston Smith was the link. The well-known religion scholar Houston Smith also had a very nice relationship with that Gyuto monastery, also from the 60s like mine. And so he told Mickey, somehow he knew Mickey, and he told about these monks, and Mickey had seen a film that he made about the monks. So somehow we linked up, and then we took the monks there with Mickey, and then we brought them again a number of times, and the Grateful Dead as a whole became friendly with the Gyuto monastery, Danny Rifkin, Bobby Weir, and others, as well as Mickey, and it was a long and wonderful relationship. I used to tell the people to visualize themselves being in a sacred space, and with sort of jewel energies all around them, and with enlightened beings swirling in the jewel energies. And just sort of imagine that as they listen to the sound. And that as long as they didn't conceive some sort of negative feeling about it, it was not the betrayal of some sort of initiatory thing or anything like that, and it could be accepted and received as a blessing if they had a favorable attitude about it. So that's how I used to do it. And actually, the esoteric rite that should be only granted to someone fit to receive that initiation with prerequisite understandings takes all day or several days. So like a 20-minute bunch of chants or just little segments. They're little, illustrative segments of these rites, and they convey a blessing. And they even had the tradition in Tibet that they would go somewhere where there'd been a flood or an earthquake or someone had died or was sick, and they would just perform for that family. Of course, they were a Buddhist family and so on. So, but still, they weren't people who were doing those practices. So it became so famous that it was just felt to be a tremendous blessing to hear it. And therefore, they were kind of like Westminster, you know, the boys' choir at Westminster. They were the royal choir. They were the Dalai Lama, one of the Dalai Lama choirs, and they would go to different places and perform that, even in Tibet. And it was considered they would help the weather. They would like please the local spirits, you know, not to bring floods or things. You know what I mean? It was really like that. So they just did that around the world. That's all. They were actually wonderful ambassadors. And people had visions while they listened to it. Very many. The ones who would report it, I guess. Probably some didn't. But it was, when they did live performances, their tours, they were really quite, I was surprised personally. Well, Mickey even used to always say, especially within the group, the drummer is the one who's, because of the rhythm, synchronizing with the heartbeat and with the blood flow in the audience, is the one who's moving, who's the engine of the transportation. You know, then the singers and the other musicians are doing other things in the brain, but the beat, you know, is the drummer. So he's the transporter himself. He used to say, which I agree with. And but the band as a whole, that the Grateful Dead and the Gyuto monks are in the same business of doing transportation of people is correct. And of course, the transportation is to move them out of their habitual, rigid identity into some sort of higher vision, feeling connected to other beings and to the universe in a positive way, seeing the possibility of love and compassion dominating over hatred and violence and horrible things in the world. I think this is true. And artists, the monks are like artists, in that, especially tantric monks, are like artists in that sense, in that, you see, an enlightened being sees the world as a beautiful place, and they see beings as made out of bliss, actually. And that's why and even if the being thinks it's suffering, the enlightened being sees them as confused about their true nature. And there's really, the bliss in their selves is what's real about them. And the way they have tortured themselves by getting freaked out by I'm separate from somebody or something's hurting me or I'm like this, that's part of their confusion. And so what the enlightened beings' drive is, altruistic drive, is to help those beings see that they are okay and they are actually fine and turn to seeing the positive side of their existence. And the way you have to begin to do that is you have to stimulate the imagination of the being, because they're so stuck in their habitual perception of the inadequacy of the world and of themselves, and it's hard for them to imagine something being more magnificent. The Gyuto one within the Tibetan one is one of the most spectacular and extraordinary things, and to have that preserved by the Smithsonian, you know, Indiana Mickey, as I sometimes used to tease him, in the sound realm, you know, he's not finding crystal skulls in Mexico, but he's finding amazing sound. And the fact that this is something that is uniquely Tibetan and that is honored in the Smithsonian and honored by Mickey and made known around the world is tremendous. It's wonderful, and it's a very important thing. And the aggregate of this type of thing, public recognition of the Tibetans' unique contribution to the tapestry of world cultures, and people loving it, actually, and therefore respecting and loving Tibetan culture and realizing that it's something unique and something to be preserved, is in the long run the way of preserving it. And that's the way of saving Tibet, actually, in the long run, and the Tibetan people. So it's immensely important. The Tibetans are very grateful to Mickey for recording it and making it known. And this act of putting it in some sort of archive in the Smithsonian is also very, very helpful and wonderful. And Tibet House also supports it. I think the Gyuto monks themselves, probably the old-timers particularly, I would say, maybe the new-timers too, they probably imagined that Mickey in a previous life was a Gyuto monk.